But to discuss that in a greater detail, it's a great pleasure to be joined by Manish Sabharwal, the Vice Chairman of Teamlease Services. Manish, thank you so much for being with us. And obviously, India didn't become the most populous country in the world overnight. It's been happening for a while, and we don't know when exactly it's going to happen. But it's a major landmark. How do you interpret this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's not a problem, right? The number of people is actually probably irrelevant. It's about productive people. So it just highlights India's challenges, but also is a big opportunity. I think that it also is a celebration of democracy. Both India and China wanted to control population at the same time in the 1970s. But in China, communism or dictatorship, whichever way you see it, allowed an unprocessed or probably unwanted thought to get implemented, while India's birth control, which tended to get a little more cursive in the 70s, didn't happen. So at various levels, you can look at this milestone, but I think it's not something that we should be worried about. It's just a reminder of the amount of work India has to do.
You're right, of course. The Chinese literally used the barrel of the gun to drive their population down, and that had its own unintended consequences. They become old before they became rich, and that's going to be a problem they're going to have to face. In India's case, though, fertility rate has come down organically, but some would argue it's not come down enough. So population is going to continue to rise for a couple of decades, 20, 30 years before India actually peaks at 1.6 or 1.7 billion or whatever the numbers are. So that's going to continue for a while.
I think these numbers are very hard to predict because the biggest thing that controls population growth is education, is economic growth, and the role of women. Now, in the next 25 years in India, economically are going to be very different from the last 25 years, just because of the compounding of reforms since 1991. And of course, a bunch of luck that has come in our way. You know, the China luck, the digitization super cycle, the factory refugees who are leaving China. So I think that, you know, to extrapolate the last 25 years to the next 25 is probably suspect at this point of time. Some skill, some luck, some choices. So I would say that, yes, we should just keep reminding ourselves that the number of people in any country doesn't matter. Haiti has very little people, but their productivity is close to zero. We also have to remind ourselves that India and China had the same per capita GDP as recently as 1991. So I guess the question you're hinting at is, India is fifth in total GDP, but 138th in per capita GDP. But we are so far from the productivity frontier, right? I mean, 40% of our labor force is vela or just hanging out. So if we just raise the productivity of our population, land, labor, capital is not a problem. You could give every Indian household half an acre, they would fit into Rajasthan and Haryana.
So if you look at that point about enhancing productivity, now those are the challenges that India is going to be facing now, right? Because it's one thing to provide that population with gainful employment, in which case, of course, the economy does really well. But if you can't provide gainful employment in this 20 to 30 year period, then it's going to be a real challenge. There could be social unrest, there could be other issues.
Possibly, but as of now, the indications are that, you know, China's had become the factory to the world and has scared the wits out of most foreign investors. So there are about 50 factory refugees, large ones who are looking to move to India. Will we get to 30-40% of our labor force in manufacturing? Probably not. But 11% of our labor force in manufacturing is the wrong number. It's almost the same as the US, which is a post-industrial society. So I think Make in India in the short run is becoming Make for India. If you look at 80% of the foreign direct investment, it's in areas where domestic markets are getting to critical mass. So I think in manufacturing, there's a bunch of luck and a bunch of high precision skills, which India has, which is working. I think, you know, IT is a rounding error. It's only 5 million jobs, but it's going to 10 million in the next 10 years. I mean, we'll hire more people in technology in the last 10 years than we hired in the last 50. But I think this notion that somehow the demographic disaster or dividend is baked in is mistaken. We have to raise the productivity of our states. You know, I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP, they have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people. In fact, if everybody in India lived in Bangalore, India's GDP would be more than China, right? India's per capita GDP is 2,500, Bangalore's GDP is $11,000. So I think if you think systematically about raising productivity of states, cities, sectors, firms and individuals, we will recognize that the only real challenge for this population is the gap in population between, say, the north and east of India and the south and west of India. In the next 25 years, only 5% of population growth is going to be in the south and west, maybe 45% of GDP growth, while 50% of population growth will be in the north and east. But we may end up with, huge migration.
All right. Thank you so much, Manish, for joining us with that view. Thank you.